Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome to The Link. It's your boy, Professor X, and we are back with another episode. Last time, we spoke about what it means to know your value, what it means to walk in purpose. And today, we are continuing from that, and we're going to talk about what it means to surrender to God's way. Because there's some of us who have understood what it is that we want to do in life. Some of us already have an idea of where we want to go. We may have a vision of where we're going to end up, but we may not know exactly how to get there. We may not have a roadmap. Then there's some of us who do have a roadmap and we started to walk on that journey. We took steps, we were making progress, and then things got derailed and now we're confused. And both of these things I want to address. And to do that, we're going to look at the life of Joseph. Because when we look at his life, he shows us that even when we go through trials, even when we go through testings, it doesn't mean that our dream is dead, and it doesn't mean that our dream was not from God. But there's a process that God needs us to go through in order to be ready to receive the things that he's shown us from before. So that's what we're going to get into today, guys. Let's get right to it. So to give context on Joseph's life, we pick up on his story in Genesis 37. And here we see Jacob, who's now named Israel. He's settled down and he's had a family. He has 12 sons, and at the time Joseph is the youngest. And we also learn that Joseph is the most favored because he came from the woman that Jacob actually liked. That's a different video, but for this one we're focusing on Joseph. So he was shown favor, and because of this his brothers disliked him. They did not like him at all, and that caused an interesting family dynamic. Now we find out in chapter 37 that Joseph is given two dreams, and these dreams give him a vision of where his life is going to go. So let me pull out my trusty Bible, because we find this in verse 5 of chapter 37, and let's pick up and see what it says. It says, "And Joseph dreamed a dream, and he told it to his brothers, and they hated him yet the more. And he said unto them, Hear, I pray you, this dream which I have dreamed. For behold, we were binding sheaves in the field, and lo, my sheaf arose and also stood upright. And behold, your sheaves stood round about and made obeisance to my sheaf. And his brothers said to him, Shalt thou indeed reign over us? Or shalt thou indeed have dominion over us? And they hated him yet the more for his dreams and for his words." But it doesn't end there. He has two dreams. "And he said yet another dream, and told it to his brothers, and said, Behold, I have dreamed a dream more. And behold, the sun and the moon and 11 stars made obeisance to me. And he told it to his father, and his father rebuked him and said unto him, What is this dream that you have dreamed? Shall I and thy mother and thy brethren indeed come to bow down ourselves to the earth to you? And his brothers envied him, but his father observed the same." What we're seeing here, guys, is that Joseph had a vision of his end goal. He knew where he was going. But what we also see is that in his young exuberance, he's sharing it with everyone he can get to listen. He's sharing it with his brothers, sharing it with his father, and we see that he gets mixed results. And sometimes that happens to us. We get this dream of where we want to go, and we immediately start spreading the information. This one has to go, that one has to know, and we can get ahead of ourselves. At this point in time, Joseph is 17 years old, and he's already given an idea of where he's going to be. But what we learn from his story is that he was not meant to get there immediately. And that is something that I want to address with our generation. A lot of times we see things on social media, we see people becoming viral overnight, we see people that look like overnight successes, and that gives us this internal pressure that we have to finish these goals in a week, in a year, 2 years. It has to be over. We have to get it done. But the thing that we see in the Bible over and over again is that God often works things through a process which takes time, because we can see already from Joseph's exuberance and how quick he was to share this information. He has some flaws. He has some things that need to be ironed out. There is no way that he can be a leader at this age, because if he became one, he lose that position. You can see he needs more self-control. You can see he needs to build that character. And a lot of times that's what God does with us. He shows us the plan and then his process begins. So now going into this second phase of Joseph's life, we see what this meant for him. This meant he was going to encounter some detours. So the second phase we're going to look at are those detours. Hey guys, I hope you're enjoying the podcast so far. Just popping in to say that if you haven't already, make sure to like the episode and also subscribe to the link. All right, let's get back to the video. So now that we're looking at this second phase of his life, we go further down in chapter 37 and we find that Joseph's brothers are working in the fields and Jacob sends Joseph out with food to carry to them. And as his brothers see him coming down, they're plotting to see how they can take him out. Some of them discuss killing him. Then the older brother says we shouldn't do that, and they change their plans. Now Joseph has brought their food and they throw him into the pit. This is the part that we're all familiar with. But now when we pick it back up down in verse 25, we learn something else that happens to Joseph that takes everything south. So let's see what it says. It says, "And they sat down to eat bread, and they lifted up their eyes and looked. And behold, a company of Ishmaelites came from Gilead with their camels bearing spicery and balm and myrrh, going to carry it down to Egypt. And Judah said unto his brethren, What profit is it if we slay our brother and conceal his blood? Come, let us sell him into the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him, for he is our own brother and our flesh. And his brethren were content. Then there passed by Midianites, merchantmen, and they drew and lifted up Joseph out of the pit, and sold Joseph to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces of silver, and they brought Joseph into Egypt." Now you see from that scripture that Joseph's life has taken a complete turn. It has gone from a life of promise to now a life of trials and testings, of actual slavery. And you can see that from first glance, it looks like, how could this have been the outcome? How could his life have gone that direction? And we can find ourselves in that position where we thought we knew where we were going, but then something happens to throw things completely off. We get a spike in the road, and we get what can feel like a complete stop, telling us that we did not hear from God, that we didn't get the right impression, that we heard the wrong thing, and now things can look bleak. However, we learn as we keep reading Joseph's story that if we just hang in there and we stay faithful, we can start to see God move. Because even in this detour of Joseph's life, he's in slavery, but he rises through the ranks. And eventually he's placed under the care of Potiphar. Potiphar is the captain of the guard, and he is he's an influential person, a high person. And eventually Joseph becomes the second in command over his entire household. So we see here that because of his faithful service, God shows him favor. The Bible makes it clear that God was still with him. So my first encouragement to us is that if we've had a dream and a vision and things went south, we lost our jobs, something happened to completely throw off our path, the first thing we need to understand is that God is still present. He has not left us. He's still guiding our steps, and he's still showing us where we need to go. This was Joseph's first detour to get his character ready, because working for Potiphar, he's learning leadership, he's learning management, all of the seeds for what he's going to need at the end. In the same way, our detours are working something in us. There's something that God is pulling out. Pride that's being destroyed, hurt that's being healed, discipline that's being built. And this is what we learn. However, Joseph's journey and his detours are not finished yet. Because when we go to chapter 39, we now see Joseph has another test to face. And when we go to verse 6 and 7, we get to realize what this test actually is. So, verse 6 tells us, "And he left all that he had in Joseph's hand, and he knew not aught he had save the bread which he did eat." Now, this is telling us what we learned before. Potiphar is now having Joseph as second in command, and Joseph does so well, the only thing he has to worry about is what he's eating. But this is where things get spicy. "And Joseph was a godly person and well favored. And it came to pass after these things that his master's wife cast her eyes upon Joseph and said, 'Lie with me.'" Listen, guys, Joseph had a lot to deal with. Now he has to deal with sexual temptation. And we see that he fends it off pretty well, but there comes a day where he's alone in the house, there's nobody around, and his wife, Potiphar's wife, throws herself on him, and to get out of the way, he flees but left his shirt behind. And now she uses that to cover her tracks, to frame Joseph. And when Potiphar finds out what happens, it's a lie, guys. Joseph is thrown into prison. So, guys, you have to see this picture. Joseph goes from a big dream to slavery, to rising up in the ranks, then to prison. So if we look at this pattern, this is something that happens a lot for us. We have this end goal, we start the journey, it gets thrown off, but then we find footing. We get to a place where we're comfortable. For example, if we have someone who wanted to be, let's say, a professional singer or a great singer, but they don't get gigs, they don't get attention, their initial efforts don't work. But they become a music teacher and they get influence at the school. The students love them, they're getting endorsements, they're getting lessons, and they get comfortable. They've found success and they say to themselves, maybe this was what I was supposed to be all along. But God does not always want us to stay in those seasons where we're just comfortable. Because if we do, we get stagnant. We don't reach the people that we're supposed to reach. Our impact is stunted. And so God has to find a way to move us from that place so that we're positioned where we're actually supposed to be. And sometimes the way he does it is through more tests. We may be laid off. We might lose our jobs, might get fired. An emergency might happen. We may have to move. All of these things can happen to us. And it's at this point where we can be tempted to just give up. Because we have already sacrificed so much. We've already detoured. We've already moved on. We've already found some kind of success. But now we find ourselves in a place where we have to start over again. And we learn that from Joseph. He's now in prison, literally having to start again from nothing. But even here, God does not want us to give up. Even here, our dream, that vision he gave us, is still at work. Because the Bible tells us that all things work together for those who love God and are called according to his purpose. So now, as we enter this third phase of Joseph's life, we start to see how every sacrifice, every downturn, every setback works for his good to place him where God wants him to be. In this third phase, we focus on the palace. Here in this third phase of his life, he's in that prison, but again, he rises through the ranks because God is with him. his favor is still there, even in that low place. And he becomes the second in command again. And the warden puts everything under his care, so he doesn't have to worry about anything. So once again, he is developing his leadership skills, he's developing his management skills, and now it's about to minister to two very important people. We learn in chapter 40 that two of Pharaoh's officers, the chief butler and the chief baker, have been thrown in the prison as well. And Joseph ministers to them because they also have dreams and they can't figure out what they mean. But we learn from when Joseph was 17 that he has that gift of interpreting dreams because he had that vision. So now he's able to serve these two men to interpret the dreams for them. So for the chief butler, his dream meant that in 3 days he was going to be promoted back to his position in Pharaoh's charge. Now, with the chief baker, this is where things got bleak. In 3 days, he was going to be executed. That's what his dream meant. And so said, so done. The butler was restored and the chief baker was executed. The only thing that Joseph asked for was that the butler remembered him when he was put back in charge. Because as we learned from before, Joseph is in prison by no fault of his own. But at the end of chapter 40, we realize that the butler forgot him completely. And Joseph was in prison for 2 more years. And right now, I just want to address the person who has gone through these similar challenges, where you were in a place where you thought you had it all and you lost it. And you've done your best to continue serving, but it seems as if things have not changed. It's been years, it's been months, it's been weeks, however long it has been, and things don't look like they're going to turn around. But my encouragement from Joseph's life is that everything that you have done, you never know who is watching, is going to come back for your good. Because even what Joseph did here, even though it took 2 years to come back around, we find in chapter 41 that now Pharaoh is in trouble because he has 2 dreams and he can't interpret them. His wise men, his magicians can't do anything for him. And now the chief butler remembers, oh shoot, there was this guy in the prison who interpreted my dream. Maybe he can help Pharaoh. And this is where everything that Joseph went through comes for his good. Because now he's called from the prison to go to Pharaoh and to interpret this dream. And when Joseph interprets the dream, the basic meaning was that there are going to be 7 years of plenty in terms of food, and then there's going to be 7 years of famine. So he told Pharaoh, make sure you save the food now while things are good, so that when the famine comes, that you'll have food to spare. And look at this, guys. Even when Joseph gave his recommendation, he still showed humility, because he told Pharaoh, find somebody who can manage things so that when the famine comes, everything will be okay. He didn't even offer himself as the solution. However, Pharaoh is no idiot, because when he hears this explanation from Joseph, he realizes there's no one else who can do this job. And if we go to verse 38 in chapter 41, this is where we see this come to life. So he tells his servants, Pharaoh said unto his servants, can we find such a one as this, a man in whom the Spirit of God is? And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, for as much as God hath showed thee this, all of this, there is none so discreet and wise as thou art. Thou shalt be over my house, and according unto thy word shall all my people be ruled. Only in the throne will I be greater than you. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, see, I have set thee over all the land of Egypt. And Pharaoh took off his ring from his hand, and put it on Joseph's hand, and arrayed him in vestures of fine linen, and put a gold chain about his neck. And he made him to ride in the second chariot which he had, and they cried before him, bow the knee. and he made him ruler over all the land of Egypt. Guys, what we learn from this story is that because of his persistence, because of Joseph's patience, and his submission to God's will, he was prepared for this moment. All of the years of leadership, all of the years of experience, coupled with the trials that he went through, has built him up to the man that can withstand the weight of a nation. And this is where we as young people have to stay consistent. When we find ourselves with different trials and in seasons where we don't understand what good could come from this, that is where submission is most important. Because God knows what we don't know. God knows all of the lessons we have to learn, the things that need to fall off, the people that can't go where we're going, the friends that need to be left behind, so to speak, the characteristics that have to be cut off, and all of the testings are what does it. So we see from Joseph now that as the second in command over all of Egypt, he is in a position where he preserves the nation of Israel. Talk about impact. Now, because of his leadership, Israel survives the famine and his nation is preserved. And so the same thing goes for us. When God gave us that vision, however long ago that may have been, there's a pivotal role that position plays. He does not want us to settle for lower positions or lower places. He wants us to be where he wants us to go. Now, this doesn't mean that everyone is meant to be an entrepreneur or a business leader, but it means that he does not want us to live below where our potential is. There is a position he wants us to be in, and the process he brings us through is what is going to get us there. So my final encouragement for us is that when we find the different twists and turns in life and the shifting seasons, and we can't seem to figure out how we're going to keep things stable or how we're going to keep things great, the first thing we have to do is throw out the myth that everything has to be put together. Because when we look at society and Instagram and Facebook and social media, we see the highlight reel of people's lives that make it look as if we're always supposed to have things together. But the Bible shows us over and over that life is up and down. It's an ebb and flow. It's seasons of plenty, it's seasons of little, seasons of having abundance, the seasons of having lack sometimes. But what God does for us is that he gives us peace and joy to make it through those hard times, so that when we're in seasons of prosperity, we can have the impact that we're supposed to have because we are grounded. We're not going to lose it because of moral failure. We're not going to lose it because of greed, because our hard seasons taught us how to stay faithful. They taught us how to love. They taught us how to be selfless. They taught us how to serve. And so we see from Joseph that his reign in Egypt lasts long because now he has learned the lessons. And the last thing that I want us to pick up from that story is that he got the dream at 17. He got to the palace at 30. So that was 13 years of sanctification, 13 years of character building. So let us stay patient. God gave us that dream, and it is his intention to bring it to pass. But this is the time for us to surrender where we think it can go. This is the time for us to keep our head down and focus, to serve in the little things, because everything we learn here is going to bring success later. So let us hold on, let us persevere, and let's continue, because God is present and he's going to make a way through. So that's my encouragement today, guys. Next time on The Link, we're going to focus on purity. We're going to look at what purity is and also what it looks like to walk in purity. So stay tuned to the next episode of The Link. Until next time, stay blessed and God bless you. Peace. Thank you for joining me on today's podcast. For more content like this, click these videos here to watch another podcast.